Hey guys, it's Jolene from Smith's Nature Friendly Farms. We're hanging out in the garden today and I thought it was about time I gave you all a quick garden tour. All right guys, it's been an interesting year this year. I have not had a single season in this is I think going on my 4 years of gardening in Mississippi. I certainly have more years gardening back in Canada, but in Mississippi, this is my fourth year of a different type of garden season every single time. Some years it's been flooding for a good portion of the season. This year it was hot really early. Then it got cold again, and then it got flooded, then it got hot again, and it's stayed incredibly hot, almost drought-like recently. So it has been kind of a wild year, and each year I kind of build these practices around preparing for whatever I'm going to hit, and I'm grateful I have, because they have played a factor. But man, it certainly makes gardening interesting in the South. All right, for some background for the folks that are new to us, that maybe haven't been following us for very long, we are growing in a no-till garden. So we don't use a tiller on the garden. It is by far my favorite way to grow. I have tilled the fields in our property in the past and grown that way. Definitely not my favorite way to grow. I love no-till. It's much kinder and gentler on nature. It's just my favorite way to grow. What can I say? So what I'll do today is I'll highlight what's grown really well this season. I'll highlight a couple things that haven't gone overly well this season. And we'll go over a couple of the weird things that I'm growing this year, because if you guys know me, I love growing unusual and strange things and growing I want to be able to say I've grown everything once kind of thing. So I've got a couple of interesting things growing in the garden today. I'll show you them as well. But let's start with what's going well. So one of the first things that's been going really, really well has been in the weed pressure. This is probably the first year I have not been consumed and lost plants due to weed pressure. The difference has been in bark mulch, in adding compost to the top, and then staying ahead of the seeded weed seeds, I guess, in a sense. So I have been working really hard at keeping up with that, but honestly, bark mulch has made a huge difference. The setup of my gardens has made a huge difference. If you can afford to invest in bark mulch, getting rid of that grass that's growing up beside any of your beds can make a huge difference in the weed pressure. This year has not been the year for me about weeds, and I'm so grateful. So one of my successes this year have actually been in the tomato department. I have a ton of gorgeous, big, beautiful tomatoes. I still have some plant disease going on. My tomatoes aren't perfect by any means, but I've actually had a lot better production and better quality this year. So I'm super excited about that. I'm not known for my tomato output, and this year I'm actually producing a pretty solid number of tomatoes. So each year we grow a large variety of cherry tomatoes, and I find the health of a cherry tomato plant is much better than an actual tomato plant for some reason. Not sure why the difference, but I never seem to have any issue producing a large number of cherry tomatoes. So this year is no different, just like the rest, lots of cherry tomatoes. So this year I spent a ton of time researching the soil, and I've always done soil samples, but I actually started to put 2 and 2 together, that even though I have high potassium and phosphorus and all these things with the exception of nitrogen, that doesn't mean that my garden is good. And because I kind of had this weird mentality that my garden was good because it was so high in all these nutrients except for nitrogen, so if I just add nitrogen, I'm hunky-dory. But the reality is it's actually not that simple. And in fact, once you're so high off the charts on all the other nutrients, it actually becomes very hard for your plants to pick up the nitrogen even if you put it down. And it stops picking up the nutrients that it already exists in the soil. So all these weird things I think I've been doing wrong in my own thinking that I'm now kind of fixing. And how am I fixing it? Well, I'm spraying my plants with some of the nutrients with like some seaweed different sprays. That's helped them greatly. I've gone and stopped adding any type of fertilizer that has the nutrients that are way off the charts already in my soil. So I'm only adding nitrogen at this point, and that's made a big difference for sure. But then I've had to supplementally spray the plants as well. And like I said, this is a completely organic seaweed spray that I'm putting on the foliage to help them uptake the other nutrients and the calcium and all the things that they're missing, that they're not getting through the soil because they're just so high in phosphorus and all these other things. So it's worked well, and it's understanding your soil can make a big difference. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, you know, you've got yellow leaves and it's because you got too much of this, too much of that. We have no clue what your leaves are yellow until you actually really sit down and take a look at your soil to truly know. It could be watering, it could be your nutrients. Anyways, I think I figured it out for now until next year. So overall, the biggest win has been in the main no-till garden. It's been a really great producing garden this season. It's worked well with the weather that we've had. So we've had really hot temperatures, and it holds the moisture better than a lot of the other methods. So actually, on that note, let's move into what's not working. So containers are one of the things that have not worked well for me this year. This one's funny because there's a little fat toad in here that I have to stop and give you a look at. Yeah, hi buddy. But containers have not done great. Now, why I love containers in the flood season. So that's why I got these. Our first couple of years of gardening, we got heavy rains, and they don't hold the moisture as well as the ground does, so things don't flood. High heat though, these black containers get dry super fast. They require moisture twice as much, and they're not as productive. You can see that some of my tomato plants are dying out. I'm fairly certain most of that is going to be in the moisture problem. So the containers haven't been great for us this year. They're not completely a waste, they just haven't been as good. I'm leaving a lot of them open, which is lost growing space because it's just too hot to keep up with, and the ground is much better option right now in this season. So going to be great for the winter time. They'll be great in the fall, well, winter and early spring, but not so much in the high heat and super dry time periods. I don't have a watering system that is automatic, and that would be ideal and obviously would make these much more fruitful. So really that's it. Those are the two main challenges. Essentially, the containers are too hot to hold moisture, and we really are not getting a lot of moisture this season. So something that we have to deal with, and we can deal with, it's no problem. It's also really why I guess it leads to an overall why my garden works so well, is that I have options. Like this no-till area will function when these guys don't, and these guys will function when these guys are drowning in heavy rain. So having a good system where you have multi-level gardening options, I think is really good. All right, let's talk about the weird stuff I'm growing this year. First one, look at this weirdo. I love it. This is a Cuckoozy squash. Sorry, Cuckoozy gourd. I keep wanting to call it a squash because it is edible like a squash, but it is actually a gourd. My in-laws have been growing this and they've eaten it. They said it tastes fine. It just tastes like a squash, maybe a little bit lighter in flavor. I haven't eaten mine yet. I do have one sitting on the counter, but this is a giant one I'm growing in the garden, and I just like it for its weirdness. Now this is a weird one, but it's technically not new to us. This is a second year returning Tomarillo plant. These guys will actually be orange when they are fully ripe, and they're kind of a stinky little plant, but their fruit is a bit bitter. I almost wonder if it wouldn't be bad in a jam or a jelly. It wasn't overly tasty fresh, but we're growing it off of a second year plant. So it did come back from last year. We did keep it in the greenhouse. Not one that we had in the ground in the garden did not come back. So that'll tell you guys, if you're in the south in Mississippi area, I don't think a Tomarillo will come back in the ground, but it will if you put it in the greenhouse. This is a Merleton, and I'm really excited about this because on a few occasions I've tried to start these guys and never gotten them to grow. This is really a Louisiana southern kind of, is it a fruit or is it a vegetable? I actually don't even know. I think it's a vegetable, but anyways, it is this. I wish I had a picture. I can't show you now because the root is gone, but this is a plant that it'll have big pear-like fruits on it. And I really do think they're actually a vegetable. So I have to do some more research, but it's the first time that I've grown them, and I'm interested to see. They're apparently quite prolific. It's supposed to climb, but we'll hopefully can keep it alive so that we actually see some fruit/vegetables off of them. We are growing these beans from Baker Creek Seeds that are like yard-long beans. There's going to be super long green beans on them. I wanted to try these guys out to see if they're any good. I'm a super big fan of contender green beans, so I think it's important though to keep trying other green beans, and it was super long, super cool, so I kind of had to see how it was like to grow. Another weird thing that we're growing this season, trying out something new, is with the Baby Bubba okra. And look at this. I'm excited about this. This is an okra plant that doesn't get as nearly as big as regular okra. Okra grows like a tree out here. Like it'll be the size of like an 8-foot, 10-foot tree, somewhere in that range. So when you're dealing with a small garden, it's really hard to grow okra. But I like to grow okra. I don't actually need a lot of it. So this I'm really excited about because the Baby Bubba is supposed to be a smaller plant and more compact. So I'll be able to get my okra and still have it fit within my garden. So for those of you that joined us, maybe because you watched our video on how to germinate dwarf moringa seeds, this is our dwarf moringa now, and it's about a year old. It's still a moody tree in my books. It has yellowing. I don't know, I can't seem to figure out exactly what causes the yellowing. It's got nutrients. It does get watered often, but it may have some inconsistencies in the watering, so that might be a cause of it. Hard to say. It does have new growth. And continues to remain. It's pretty hardy, actually. I find that it does grow back very easily. It has moments where it's lost all of its leaves and has come back. So it is a pretty easy plant to grow. I just call it moody because the leaves are always going yellow, and I'm not entirely sure why. Now, that's not necessarily the plant's fault, probably my fault, but I still have fun calling it the moody plant. So that's it, guys. That's my garden update. Super successful garden so far this season. Mighty hot this year. Mighty, mighty hot. Too early, too quick, but it is what it is, and we're still growing within it. So if you've got any ideas, comments, make sure you share them down below. Take care, you guys. Be friendly. Be kind.